In the dark corners of medieval Europe, where ice kissed the seas and thunder echoed across the fjords, there lived a people who feared no death, born of fire and frost, raised on myth and blood. They were the Vikings. They worshipped gods like Odin, the all-seeing wanderer, Thor, the hammer-wielding protector, and Freya, fierce and divine. To them, sacrifice wasn't a plea. It was a transaction with eternity. But then, the unthinkable happened. These fierce pagans laid down their axes and bowed before the cross. This is not just a tale of religious change. It is a story of betrayal, politics, power, and transformation. Forget what you think you know about Viking conversion to Christianity. This wasn't some sudden society-wide spiritual awakening, everyone seeing a new light simultaneously. What if I told you that for many Viking kings, embracing the cross was less about saving their souls and far more about cementing their thrones? That swapping Thor and Odin for Christ was, in essence, a masterclass in political strategy. For centuries, Norse communities thrived in a world governed by a pantheon of powerful, often unpredictable gods. You had Odin, the All-Father, exceptionally wise and cunning; Thor, the formidable protector of humanity with his mighty hammer; and Freya, the captivating goddess of love, fertility, and war. Their faith wasn't a mere Sunday ritual. It was intricately woven into their daily lives, their social fabric, their very identity. It was a belief system that celebrated strength, battlefield honor, and ancestral wisdom. This formed the bedrock of Viking society, these fierce warriors, astute traders, and legendary explorers who raided and established settlements across vast swaths of Europe. They believed in Valhalla, a glorious afterlife reserved only for warriors who died in battle. To fall with sword in hand. These weren't just myths. They were reality woven into every part of Viking life. Children grew up hearing tales of gods and giants. Warriors swore oaths in Odin's name before battle. Farmers prayed to Freyr for fertile soil and good harvests. Women made offerings to Freya, goddess of love, war, and fate. Religion was raw and wild. They carved runes into stones and skin. They held midnight rituals, burned offerings, even sacrificed humans to please gods they both loved and feared. Temples, known as hofs, stood at the heart of villages, wooden halls filled with carvings, firelight, and the scent of sacrifice. Pagan rituals were held beneath sacred trees or near waterfalls, where the veil between worlds was believed to be thin. Animals were slaughtered, blood was spilled, and the people believed it would bring health, prosperity, or victory. Death was not an end, it was a test. To die with honor in battle was to be chosen by the Valkyries, warrior maidens of Odin, who carried the brave to Valhalla, a hall of endless feasting and combat, preparing for the final war. But cowards? The unworthy? They went to hell, a cold gray underworld where no song was sung and no gods watched. This belief system shaped every raid, every conquest, every death. It wasn't just about religion, it was about identity, destiny, and the place of man in the cosmos. To be a Viking was to carry this faith like a shield, forged in fire, bound by blood, and spoken in the language of myth. But change was coming, and it would not arrive with sword or axe, but with the quiet whisper of a prayer. So, what drove these fiercely independent Viking rulers, steeped in their ancient traditions, to even consider the Christian God? Well, for many, it wasn't a sudden spiritual revelation. It was a pragmatic calculation of political and economic advantages, a purely strategic maneuver. First, there was the allure of legitimacy and powerful alliances. Christian Europe was the dominant force. By converting, a Viking king could gain recognition from influential Christian rulers, transforming his image from a pagan raider to a peer, an equal with whom one could negotiate. This was crucial for forging treaties, securing borders, and even obtaining military aid against rivals, both domestic and foreign. Consider Harald, a Danish king in the early 9th century. He was baptized primarily to secure support from the Frankish emperor Louis the Pious, after being ousted from his kingdom. His conversion? A clear-cut political chess move. And when Harald Bluetooth of Denmark converted around 960 AD, Emperor Otto I himself reportedly witnessed the event, underscoring the immense diplomatic stakes. Second, conversion unlocked doors to enhanced trade and economic integration. Christian kingdoms often favored trading with fellow Christians. Adopting the new faith could streamline trade agreements, grant access to lucrative markets, and integrate Viking economies into the flourishing European network. For a people who depended on trade as much as raiding, this was a massive incentive. Some pagan kings even encouraged missionaries in trading hubs like Hedeby and Birka, likely to make Christian merchants feel more secure and facilitate smoother commerce. And third, perhaps the most compelling reason for ambitious rulers, Christianity provided an exceptional tool for consolidating internal power. Norse society was traditionally quite decentralized, with local chieftains wielding significant autonomy. The Christian Church, with its hierarchical structure and the doctrine of divinely appointed kings, offered an ideal model and a potent justification for stronger, more centralized royal authority. Kings could establish a national church with loyal bishops to exert tighter control over their territories, improve tax collection, such as tithes for new churches, and diminish the influence of traditional pagan priests and rival chieftains. It was a pathway to a more unified kingdom, with the king, endorsed by the church, positioned firmly at the apex. Kings who played the game. History is replete with examples of Viking leaders who masterfully navigated this complex interplay of religion and politics. Harald Bluetooth of Denmark is a prime example. He famously proclaimed Denmark a Christian kingdom around 965 AD on the Jelling Stones. While the narrative often includes a miracle by a missionary named Poppo, the political benefits were undeniable. His conversion helped him consolidate his rule over a unifying Denmark and project an image of a civilized monarch to his powerful German neighbors. It was as much a strategic branding exercise as a spiritual commitment. Over in Norway, the path to Christianity was often more turbulent, but equally intertwined with royal ambition. Olaf Tryggvason, king in the late 10th century, was a zealous convert. He utilized his new faith, and no small measure of force, to unify Norway under his dominion and his god. Having been baptized in England, a shrewd move that likely secured him funds and political backing for his bid for the Norwegian throne, he, once in power, demolished pagan temples and compelled chieftains to convert, effectively dismantling old power structures and centering authority around himself under a Christian banner. His successor, Olaf II, later venerated as Saint Olaf, continued this trajectory. He was undoubtedly a devout Christian, but his efforts to solidify the religion's standing were also deeply connected to creating a unified, independent Norwegian kingdom. Ironically, his martyrdom and subsequent sainthood evolved into a potent symbol of Norwegian identity, binding Christianity even more tightly to the crown. Even Viking leaders who established themselves outside Scandinavia, like Rollo in Normandy, understood the game. Rollo accepted baptism to legitimize his claim to Normandy, a territory granted by the Frankish king. This conversion was integral to the peace treaty and the establishment of his duchy, enabling him to integrate his Norse followers into the Frankish political sphere. These kings were not necessarily all cynical manipulators devoid of genuine faith. Some may have experienced sincere spiritual awakenings. However, the overarching pattern reveals that the timing and method of their conversions and their promotion of Christianity within their realms were intrinsically linked to distinct political objectives: power, stability, and integration into the broader European stage. It's a complex tapestry, isn't it? Far more intricate than simple tales of missionaries and miracles. If you're intrigued by this exploration of Viking political maneuvering, do me a solid and hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories that shaped our world. And I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Which Viking king's story captivates you the most? The Viking transition to Christianity wasn't like flipping a switch. Odin and Thor weren't unceremoniously kicked out overnight, wholly replaced by Christ and the saints. What actually unfolded was a truly fascinating period of syncretism, where old and new beliefs intermingled, creating a unique Scandinavian expression of Christianity. In Christian Europe, kings didn't just rule by the sword, they ruled by divine right. To be blessed by the church was to be seen as chosen by God. Without that blessing, you were just another man with a crown. The Viking rulers saw this, and they understood what it meant, so they forged alliances with bishops, married Christian noblewomen, adopted foreign laws and holy days. But in secret, they still whispered to the old gods, still carved runes deep in the forests, far from the reach of the cross. But the church was clever. It did not crush Norse culture, it consumed it. Yule, the Viking midwinter feast, became Christmas, the festival of Odin transformed into saints' days. You see, the cross did not conquer the hammer through war alone, it seduced it. And in the end, the gods of the north did not fall screaming in battle. They faded quietly into prayers, into cathedrals, into memory. By the 11th century, the Viking world had changed dramatically. What began as a strategic decision by kings to adopt Christianity evolved into a deep transformation of Scandinavian society, religiously, politically, and culturally. For rulers in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, converting to Christianity was not simply a matter of faith. It was a calculated political move, a masterstroke of diplomacy. Once Christianized, these kingdoms were no longer seen as pagan outliers. They were accepted into the heart of Christian Europe, able to form alliances, trade, and participate in diplomacy as equals. Christianization brought more than spiritual alignment. It opened doors for economic growth. Christian merchants and neighboring kingdoms felt safer trading with Scandinavia. Monasteries, bishoprics, and churches were built, not just as religious centers, but as administrative hubs and schools. With them came Latin literacy and entirely new legal and social systems. Marriage, inheritance, justice, all gradually came under the influence of Christian law. Even the Church's Peace of God movement, aimed at limiting violence, began to shape Viking society, softening the clan-based warrior culture that had once defined it. But this transformation came at a cost. As kings grew stronger with the Church's support, local pagan traditions were pushed aside. Chieftains lost influence. Sacred groves were destroyed. Temples were torn down. While early Christianization allowed for a mix of customs, over time, Norse paganism faded. Not because it was overthrown in a single moment, but because it was replaced deliberately. By the late Viking Age, raiding had declined. Many Viking leaders had become Christian kings. Their ambitions had changed from expansion through war to consolidation through law and religion. The old gods were not lost in battle. They were abandoned as part of a political evolution. The thunder of Thor's hammer was silenced, and in its place rang church bells. Not just a sound of new faith, but the signal of a new political order. So, as you can discern, the Christianization of the Vikings is far from a simple narrative of religious conversion. It's a compelling saga of political ambition, astute strategy, and profound cultural metamorphosis. To be sure, individual Vikings undoubtedly experienced genuine spiritual transformations, but the overarching shift, especially among the leadership, was driven by the tangible, real-world advantages Christianity presented in a rapidly evolving European landscape. Kings like Harald Bluetooth, Olaf Tryggvason, and their contemporaries weren't passively allowing a new faith to envelop them. They were shrewd strategists, fully aware that embracing Christianity could secure enhanced power, greater international respect, and stronger alliances with Europe's leading Christian kingdoms. They understood that the cross could be just as potent a tool for building kingdoms as the sharpest battle axe. The resulting blend of Norse and Christian elements forged a uniquely vibrant cultural moment. But over time, the political and social tides flowed steadily toward the new religion, reshaping Scandinavian society from the top down. The Viking kings who traded their ancient gods for political supremacy did more than change their kingdom's spiritual allegiances. They changed the future of Scandinavia permanently. What are your thoughts on this? Was it a brilliant political masterstroke, or an inevitable absorption of a smaller culture by a more dominant one? The Vikings did not disappear from history. They reshaped it. They waged war against the world, then fought a greater war within themselves. The story of the Vikings is not just about a clash of gods, but about the human soul, standing between the past and the future, choosing a new path. So, which path would you have chosen? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the Viking past, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into history's most fascinating turning points. Thanks for watching.